Everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays are stories I like to bring to you. It'd be great if you could join us, or maybe you might want to drop a like or even subscribe. That'd be fab. Or if you'd like to join my Patreon's oh god, I forgot it then. Patreon.com/JessRose5472. Or you could just watch. That's just fab as well. So whatever you choose to do, I'll appreciate. So tonight's story, it is a request. It is a request from one of my my ever faithfuls. His name's Phil. And he this one does hit quite close to home for him. I've gotta say it does for me. I think it will for a lot of people out there as well. Now it was my first introduction to the term disability mate crime. I'd never heard of that before this case that I'd come across. I'd originally heard about it on Britain's Darkest Taboos. Don't know if you've ever seen that show or heard of it, but some horrific cases on there from, like I say, Britain. They do have, no, I think the other shows are Britain's worst killers, aren't they? And then you've got the world's worst. So this is a different, it's Britain's Darkest Taboos. I think it might also be on, oh, I can't think of the other name, but there was a BBC special as well called My Story. It's about half an hour long, and that's related to Gemma Hayter too. And it's from the point of view of her sister and her mum. So just an absolutely heartbreaking case. So I'll bring that to you now. So it's the Harrowing Gemma Hayter Story. Okay. Now, Gemma Hayter, born on the 13th of September 1982, I believe in Rugby, which is in the West Midlands in the UK. I've looked everywhere, and everywhere I see that it's Rugby, so I think that's where she would have been born as well. I didn't hear that they moved as a family or anything else. Now, Gemma's mum was Sue Prince, is Sue Prince. She had an older sister, Nikki, who's 10 years older than Gemma. She had an older brother, he's 7 years older. We do have a niece as well called Taylor. She's actually 11 years younger. So Nikki had Taylor when she was 21. And at that point, Gemma would have been about 11. When Taylor came along. So, bit about Gemma, right? From everything I've heard about this girl, she sounds like she was just the cutest, sweetest, kindest girl ever. Everything I've read about her, heard about her, watched about her. Okay, now around about the age of 2, Sue started to notice that Gemma was a little bit different to her 2 older kids. Don't forget, by this point, Nikki's 10. Her brother, I do know her brother's name, but I haven't heard him mentioned in recent times, so I don't want to put his name out there. So her brother, he would have been 7 when she was born, and Sue started to notice, like I say, when Gemma got to about 2, that she wasn't like the older kids. She wasn't meeting the milestones that her other 2 or any other kids that she'd been around. You know, she wasn't walking as quick. She wasn't talking as quick. She wasn't understanding things as quick as her other kids had, or like I say, it wasn't just related to her own kids. It was any kids that she knew. Gemma was just very, very different. Now, as for Nikki and her brother, they just found Gemma hilarious. They found her very funny because she would just get into these crazy situations. She'd pull like everything out of cupboard. There's pictures of her with pen all over her face, and to me in the pictures she just looks like a typical toddler, I'm gonna be honest. But no, the differences did begin to show themselves quite early on. But she was a very cute little girl, and she loved everyone she met. If she met someone once, the next time she'd see them or speak to them or come across them, she'd run up to them like she'd known them all her life, that like they were her family member. She was just a very loving little girl. Okay. She loved animals. She would want to play and stroke with every dog that she saw. She was just such a lovely girl. She did seem to gravitate towards younger children. She seemed to get on with younger kids better. They did notice that. But she just loved life. She loved everybody. She was just a really sweet little child. Now, what it was said, she was very, very trusting, so you wouldn't have allowed her sort of to go off very far from your eyesight, because, she was the sort that if someone says, come here with me, she'd go, that kind of way. She's quite a naive little girl. Now, as all little girls are, but I mean that carried on as she started to get older. There was no sense of any danger. Everyone was a friend as far as Gemma was concerned. And that's all she wanted. That is genuinely all Gemma wanted. She just wanted friends. That was it. And unfortunately, I don't know why, but she just didn't tend to make friends very easily. And she'd look at her older brother and sister and their friend groups and stuff, and they said you could tell that's all she wanted. And I said it when I originally done this story. What? Who doesn't? Everyone deserves a friend. Everybody should have at least a friend. It's not much to ask in life. It's just to have somebody you can trust and you can have a laugh with and who you get on with. It's not a lot to ask at all, and that's all this girl really wanted. Now, as she began to get older, she did go to mainstream school. Now, like I say, Sue had spotted that she believed there was something different about Gemma. Now, she had tests, chromosome tests that came back clear. All these tests that they were doing. Now, don't forget, Gemma was born in 1982. Okay? Very, very early on in, I suppose, the, would you say, studying or looking into the autism spectrum disorder, just any of those, the Asperger's, any of those under that umbrella. It was quite early on, I believe. And every doctor that Gemma was being sent to, they were just telling her, so no, she's fine, she'll catch up, she's good. Mainstream school, Sue was told, she's all right, she's coping. And everyone around could see Gemma wasn't coping. She wasn't doing well. She wasn't thriving in these environments. She really wasn't. But no one would listen. No one would listen to Sue. And as Nikki started to get older, she'd get involved. No one would listen. There would be tests done and it'd be like, no, do you know what? She's fine. She'll catch up. People are different, I suppose. Do you know, so frustrating. I felt so frustrated listening to them talk, because for personal reasons, I get their frustration, and my heart just goes out to them, because we're in a different time now, and parents are being listened to more now. And I don't think Sue was getting that same that same help at all. Okay. Now, like I say, all she wanted socially, all she wanted was a friend. That was it. Okay. Now, Taylor, do you remember I said Nikki's daughter? She came about, so now Gemma's about 10. Taylor's born, and it said that she loved little Taylor. Taylor would be her niece. She loved her. And, you know, there's photos of Taylor celebrating her first birthday. And Gemma's there with her, but they do make a joke and say that Gemma was probably staring that way, like, well, where's my cake? I want a cake too. And I think they had to relight the birthday candles so she could blow it out. Again, I understand that. And she did, like I say, she just gravitated towards younger children. She just did. And it was because mentally, Gemma, she was younger. She wasn't, although she was growing up and having birthdays and getting older, mentally, she wasn't getting older, and she still was very, very childlike and very, very naive. You know, they checked for learning difficulties. Apparently, no, she was fine. It's just such a shame. They just weren't getting the help for her. So as she was going into her teenage years, now, as we know, teenagers, they start to become quite vain, don't they? They start, you know, makeup if it's girls and fixing their hair if it's boys, and constantly wanting to make sure they look good, changing the clothes probably 2-3 times a day, you know. But Sue says Gemma didn't do that. Her hygiene really wasn't at the top of her list at all. And she does say that, you know, you had trouble even getting Gemma to even brush her teeth, let alone sort of wash herself, and soap was out of the question. They were Sue's words. So she had to be encouraged to do those things, reminded to do those things. And this is what I'm saying, just because she's a teenager, you know, mentally, you look at I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to pinpoint an age, and I'm just saying someone much younger doing those things wouldn't be first and foremost. I mean, how many times do you have to remind your kids to brush their teeth? You know, she just wasn't there where her peers were. Now, Sue was still fighting to get Gemma help all these years as she's gone into her teenage years. But now we get to age 19, okay? And Gemma had got a place at a special school in Wales. Okay, family are over the moon. Absolutely over the moon with this. She got to learn social skills. She got to learn how to basically gain independence as a young adult, about washing herself, her own hygiene, as I'd mentioned, to cook for herself, you know, maybe work out money, but basically mostly social skills, you know. And her family were just very happy with her being there, although she's quite far away. They know she's safe, they know she's happy, you know, and it was going very well, and she stayed there for 2 years. But for the third year in this school, Gemma had to agree to it. Now, Gemma's in her early 20s now, and Gemma wants to run her own life. She knows she's an adult now. Now, like I say, mentally, possibly she's entering maybe her teenage years, but with regards to her actual birthday, she's early to, I think she's around 21 at this point, and she's a woman, and she wants independence, and she wants to run her own life, and she feels, more to the point, she feels she can. And her family, it must have put the fear of God in them, because they know, and they not only know that she's not capable of that, even with all the help that she'd got in the school she'd gone to in Wales, it's the naivety they're worried about. You know, she still believed that everyone was a friend, and that's what she was desperate for. She just wanted friends. I just feel so sorry for this girl. I just, you know, you just want to, you would have loved to her to have met good friends, nice friends, you know, just come across people who wanted to help her and be there for her. Okay, so she comes back home, all right, but she doesn't come and live in the family home. She felt she's learned enough to live on her own now, okay? So she does come back to Rugby. And she does live in a couple of places over the next couple of years, but again, because not understanding what's the word I'm looking for? Not the importance of money, but the quality of money. I'm not saying that right, but she wasn't paying her bills. She wasn't paying her rent. You know, all the time, Sue and Nikki are trying to get adult services involved just to try and help her as a vulnerable adult, just so she's got a social worker. They can't get it. They can't get this help for her because Gemma hasn't been diagnosed with anything. So they're not inclined to come out and help this girl. And it's just, it must have been just, they must have been pulling their hair out. Now, she gets to age 24. Okay, this is about 2007. This is, okay. Now, 2007 to, about 2007, okay. So the council move her into a social housing flat, all right. Now, she'd actually been signed off from the assisted living part of the social services department because they'd actually had a guy come out. They'd had him come out and evaluate her, and he'd come out to Sue's house to evaluate Gemma. And Sue says he stayed about 10 minutes, and for half of that, Gemma wasn't even in the room. And he just evaluated that she was fine. She'd be fine living on her own. And he signed her off. She was signed off from any adult care whatsoever. That was it. That was it. And just how frustrating. It must have been so hard to get that guy out in the first place, and then he comes for 10 minutes. Doesn't even really see her for, I mean, you'd need to stay. To see something like that, you'd need to monitor someone over a few days, if not weeks, to see how they cope, how they feed themselves, clean themselves, deal with their household, you know, their bills, etc. He stayed for 10 minutes and signed her off. Okay. Now, she was living in a high-rise, like I say, in Rugby. And I've seen the building. And when she moved in, Sue went round, she cleaned it top to bottom for her. She was given new furniture, new sofa, TV, stereo, DVD player. She was kitted out. You know, this flat was all kitted out for her, just to try and make it as comfortable as possible for her. Now, her family were constantly worried, though, because this high-rise, it wasn't for people living in assisted living situations or people who had social workers. This flat was where Sue found out they were sending people who'd just come out of prison, people who struggled with drug abuse. This was where Gemma was. This very naive, innocent girl. This is where she was living. And they homed in on her very quickly. Very, very quickly. Now, Her family, like I say, constantly worried. And if ever they tried to meet her, and and go around and collect her or anything else, she'd never let them come to her flat. Ever. They weren't allowed in her flat. She'd meet them outside. And her mum says she never wanted to sort of go up to the door because she wouldn't want to be in a position where Gemma was saying, you can't come in. She goes, but she did know. I don't know if it's through Nikki or through neighbours, but her flat had become horrific inside. I have seen pictures of it. It was her bedding. Her bedding had mould on the pillow and on the duvet. That's what she was sleeping in. There was just rubbish everywhere from just crisp papers and sweets and, very, 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 very neglected place. And the smell was horrific in there. And I'm presuming this is why she wouldn't let any of her family in. And herself, she was quite unkept. She was, her hair wasn't done and things like that. They were really, really worried about her. But Gemma herself, she's living this independent life. She's a woman now, and this is what she wanted, and it's just very, very, very sad. It really is. Now, in a couple of cases, remember I said there was drug dealers living in this building. There was people just coming out of prison. And one of them had befriended Gemma, and he'd asked her to look after some presents for him. Now I have got my fingers up. Presents for him. It wasn't presents. It was drugs. And when one of her neighbours asked her, look, what are you doing? What are you looking after? Well, he's my friend and they're his presents, and I said I'd look after them for him. And these weren't soft drugs. This was heroin. They had in this poor girl's flat. And she just believed she was doing a friend a favour. This was what Gemma was up against now. Men were taking advantage of her during this time. That bit's very upsetting. I've heard different things about that side of Gemma's life that I hadn't mentioned in the original video, but yeah, not only did she want a friend, I think she saw people who had relationships, with the opposite sex, and that's what she wanted, and they just took advantage of her sexually, and she thought they liked her, and so she was going through a lot at this time. She just didn't realise she was going through a lot. I don't think. Okay, so she just wanted to be seen as an equal in society. That's all she wanted. Again, she wanted a friend, maybe even a couple of friends if she could, and she just wanted to be seen as an equal. I don't think that's hard to ask for anyone to ask of that of their lives. It's just so sad. Okay, so now we get to when Gemma was 26, okay? We get to 2009, all right? And she meets a girl called Chantal Franklin Booth. Chantal, at this point, she's 18, okay? Now, a little bit about Chantal. Chantal was brought up in the care system. She'd had a bit of a rough start to her life. You can hear the lack of sympathy in my tone. You'll understand why very soon. Chantal, she's only 18, but she's already had a couple of kids taken off her through neglect. So she's not the greatest person that Gemma could have come into contact with. Now, of course, Gemma's family didn't know this background on Chantal at all. So when they saw this girl who quite openly looked like she wanted to be friends with Gemma. You know, even though the age gap, you know, Chantal's 18, Gemma at this point's 26. That's a big age gap, life-wise. But don't forget, Gemma herself mentally is probably much younger than Chantal. So they were just grateful that Gemma maybe had a friend. They were just happy. Did they think Chantal was this great person? Nikki said, you know, she wasn't too sure about it, but she was happy for Gemma. Okay. Now, the family, you know, they were happy. They would go out together. Gemma would go over there for coffee and stuff. It looked like it was all going very well, but quite quickly the family start to notice Chantal is taking money from Gemma. Now, she's not stealing it. She's not stealing from Gemma, but she's quite happy to take money from her. Okay? And it starts to get noticed at the local post office. Okay? Gemma would come in when her money was due, and there was always Chantal or one of Chantal's other friends that would be with Gemma, and Gemma would buy them whatever they wanted. And the post office woman said, she said, had there been a social worker or anybody, you know, we would have mentioned it to them that, look, this girl's constantly being surrounded by these younger kids, basically. We feel like they're taking advantage of her, but she had no one to tell. This post office woman didn't. And so that didn't go unnoticed, okay? Now, Gemma herself, she felt she was just helping out a friend. That's how she saw it. And no matter what was said to her, you couldn't tell her, listen, this girl's taking advantage of you. She would hear none of that. This is her friend. And as far as Gemma's concerned, Chantal can have whatever she likes because she's her friend. Okay? Now, one day, Gemma was seen outside a bus stop by a woman who knew her. And she says, you know, what are you doing? And she did notice that Chantal was with her and another guy was there. And she called Gemma over and she's like, what are you doing? She goes, well, we're going to Coventry. She's like, why are you going to Coventry? What are you doing? Why are you going with them? And she was like, wow, they tell me what they want and I get it for them. And quite obviously this woman saw that either Gemma's paying for it or she's stealing for them. And she was like, but why? Why are you doing that? And she's like, because they're my friends. So it had got to the point where if she didn't have the money to buy Chantal what she wanted, she would steal it for her. She didn't see it as a bad thing. She saw that she was doing it for her friend. It's just so frustrating. Okay, we get to 2010 now. Gemma's about 27 at this point. Now, Chantal is going out with a lad called, remember I said the lad who was there when they were going to Coventry. His name is Daniel Newstead, okay? He's about 20 at this point. Chantal around this point is about 20. Yeah, she's about 20, sorry. He's about 20, okay? And they're friends with a couple who live a few doors down. They live on the same floor of Chantal lives in a block of flats. Not the same as Gemma, just a bit over the way. You can kind of walk to it. And on the same floor as Chantal lives a girl called Jessica Linus. And she's got a boyfriend called Joe Boyat. Don't worry, you're going to get to know these names very, very soon, very quickly. Now, Jessica's about 18, Joe's about 17 at this point. So, we have two couples. We have Chantal and Daniel. Chantal is Gemma's so-called best friend. And we have Jessica and Joe. Okay? Jessica and Joe are Chantal and Daniel's friends. And there's also a lad that hangs about with them called Duncan Edwards. He's about 19. Okay. So they're all teenagers, bar Chantal, she's 20 now. All right. So Gemma gets to meet these guys too. Remember I was saying there's people who go down to the post office when she's drawing out her money. There was a lad with Chantal at the bus stop when they were going to Coventry. So they're all in on this kind of thing where, we need anything, get Gemma. Now, it was said that in normal circumstances, they wouldn't have had time for Gemma. They weren't interested in Gemma. Jessica Liners, again, she was had a rough upbringing. She was in the care system. She'd also had a child taken off her. She was 18 at this point. Okay, also had a child taken off her. The three lads, Daniel, Joe and Duncan, were very well known to police at this point. Joe is only 17 at this point. These people wouldn't have hung about with Gemma. They had no interest in her as a friend. They just wanted what they could get out of her. She just didn't know. And I don't think she'd have cared. I think she just, as long as they said they were her friends, that's all they needed to do. It's like a child. I'll give you this if you'll be my friend. That's kind of where she was coming from. And I just so wish she just could have met somebody. Just somebody who would have just been her friend without the strings. No strings attached. You want to come over? We'll have coffee. Come on. You know, we'll go shopping. You know, I'll spend my own money. You know, I don't need to take money off you. You know, that's the kind of friend she would have needed. And instead, she meets these people. And we get to Monday, the 9th of August, 2010. It's about 5 a.m, okay? And there's a jogger running along in Rugby. There's a disused railway. It's a disused railway line. And there's a jogger out, 5 o'clock in the morning, very quiet out. And as he's jogging along the line, he comes across the body of a young woman. She's face down in the grass. Okay. She's also naked. So, of course, he rings 999 straight away. Okay. And when the police get there, they obviously find this woman. They look around. A bit further down, there's a black bag with some clothes in it. They believe these clothes belong to this young woman. The clothes look like they've been they're singed. It's like they've been tried to be set fire to. Now, the police go round to Suze. Okay. And they tell her to sit down. Because they explain that they've found the body of a young woman that morning on the railway line. And they believe it to be Gemma. Right? Sue thinks at that point, she says everything goes black when she hears it. She can't hear anything else. Can't think of anything else. But after a bit, when she realises it's Gemma and, you know, she starts thinking, she believes maybe she's met somebody, bumped into somebody, and they've said, come with us. She believes it's a stranger who's lured Gemma onto that railway track, because Gemma would go. If someone was like, yeah, come here, I've got something for you, she would go. And that's what they believe may have happened. They obviously don't know yet, but that's what they believe. So Sue has to go in and ID her daughter. And she says that it's actually Sue, Nikki, and Sue's mum, which would be Gemma and Nikki's grandmother, that ID Gemma. And she just says, oh, it's just heartbreaking. Her brother couldn't go in. He actually says in the program I'd watched, I think it was the Britain's Darkest Taboos one, he says all he could hear was his mum screaming. And she says, you know, she was black and blue. Her face was so swollen. Her nose looked like it was detached from her face. She said she just looked like she'd just been, they were her words, beaten black and blue. Oh, just absolutely heartbreaking. Okay. So we get to Tuesday, the 10th of August, 2010. So the next day. All right. The police have been going through Gemma's phone and they see Chantal's name on there over and over again, like messages back and forth between Gemma and Chantal. I speak to Sue, she's like, yeah, that's her best friend, you know, so the police want to go and talk to Chantal. Okay. They're also, Sue tells them that Gemma had gone out on the Saturday night. So, and she said she'd gone out with her friend Chantal. That was what Sue had believed Gemma had been doing on the Saturday. And she'd gone out with Chantal into Rugby City Centre. So the police start looking at CCTV footage of Rugby City Centre. Okay. And what they see makes them bring in Chantal and Daniel. And not long after, they bring in Joe, Jessica and Duncan. They bring in all 5. Now, no one's actually accused these 5 of anything just yet. But they're all there laughing and joking. Now, Gemma's their friend, supposedly. But they're all there laughing and joking. Quite cocky, rude, vile. And it's like, hang on a minute. That was your friend and you're all here finding this a great laugh. So they kind of give themselves away to begin with to the police. They're like, there's something very odd going on here. So we go back to Saturday, the 7th of August, 2010. Okay. Now, Gemma, it was getting towards the evening. It's about 7 o'clock and she's round at Sue's. And she's very excited. She's going out on a night out with Chantal and everyone else. And she's really excited about this. She's going into the town centre. And, you know, she gives her mum a hug. She gives her a kiss. She tells her she loves her. And off she goes. All right? Now, the police, well, remember when I says they found CCTV footage of that Saturday night? Well, basically what had happened was they had all gone out together. And I've heard two versions. Either one doesn't matter. The end result is the same. But one version I've heard, they were in a pub and Chantal was trying to get served at the bar. And Gemma turned around and says, oh, she's only 15. The other version I've heard is that they were trying to get into a pub and Gemma turned around and says, oh, she's only 16. Either way, it doesn't matter. But one of those things definitely happened because none of the group then could get into any of the pubs in Rugby City Centre at all. And what you can see on the CCTV footage is it looks like Duncan or Joe is just shouting at Gemma. Now, you can't hear, there's no sound, but you can see exactly what's going on in this footage. And next thing you know, you see Chantal drag Gemma sort of by her clothes and just drag her down the road, off sort out of the eye line of the CCTV footage, and you see Jessica, Joe, and I think it's Daniel laughing, finding it very funny as this girl. Now, remember what I told you about Gemma. She's a kind, sweet, gentle, innocent, just wants friends, beautiful girl. She's also very childlike, very naive. And the actual watching of seeing this girl being dragged down the street by the scruff of her neck, like she's a dog, is just heartbreaking. Okay? Now, about an hour later, there's another CCTV angle, and it shows Duncan and Chantal. Apparently Jessica's already slapped, it's not seen on the footage, but already Jessica's already slapped Gemma now. Chantal has already raised her hand to her. There's, on this footage, you can see Duncan literally screaming at her. This girl mustn't have had a clue what was going on. Sue said Gemma had a sense of humour. She would have thought what she said in the pub was just a joke. It was just a joke. And they see it as she's completely ruined their night. And rather than just, I don't know, calling it a night, go home, they just drag her up and down this high street. Look, she's nothing. So, when I first heard this story, okay, and we know what's happened to Gemma on the Monday, I believed something must have been done to her on that Saturday night. That's what I believed. But it didn't. Okay? She goes home on the Saturday night. She must have been very upset about what had just been done to her. You know, being dragged up and down the road, screamed at, slapped. But she goes home. Okay? But now we get to Sunday, the 8th of August, 2010. Alright, so it's the next day. Now, Chantal calls Gemma. And Gemma, I believe, has left her bag with one of them the night before. But when she asks, can I come round and get my bag, she finds out that Jessica and Joe and Duncan are also at Chantal's, and she doesn't want to go then. And just to know that she had that sort of pause, it was like, oh, just stick to that. But Chantal calls her. She convinces her. She gets round her. She's like, come on, just come round. It'll be fun. We're just having dinner. It's fine. Come on round. And she convinces her. She convinces Gemma to go round. And the CCTV footage of Gemma leaving her flat as she's going out the door, you know, as you get out of the lift and you go out of the door of the building. And the CCTV footage of her leaving her flat. And she's got a little bag in her. And you just want to be like, don't go, don't go, don't go. I said this the original time I covered the story, so please don't go. But she does. She goes round, and when she gets round there, everything's okay at first. But the group are all drinking. I don't know what happened to dinner, but they're all drinking. They're all smoking. And the night before starts to come up again. Now, I don't know if they'd been discussing it before she got there, if that's why they brought her there. I don't know. We'll never know when this actually triggered off. But the discussion still comes up again. And it said, I believe it's Joe. He kind of throws a cushion at her. And just from throwing that cushion triggers this pack mentality in the 5 of them. And they begin a 4-hour torture session of this innocent girl. They tie her to a chair. They duct tape her mouth and her eyes. She was beaten around the head with a mop. Chantal headbutts her. And the force of her headbutting her, it's believed that fractured her nose. Then just to break her nose completely, do you remember what I says her mum said when she went to see her? It was like her nose was no longer attached to her face. Well, yeah, they bounce her face off an industrial-sized radiator. And the reason we know that is there's so much blood up that radiator. In fact, there's blood all round that flat when the police go and look. Gemma's blood's everywhere. Okay. They pee in beer cans and force her to drink it. They lock her in the bathroom. They just terrorise this girl. They slap her, punch her. There's 3 lads and 2 girls. There's 5 of them. Not one of them could be like, all right, let's call it a day now. Let's maybe let's not even start it. But at least couldn't someone have just gone, okay, let's stop now. But no, something had happened in them that it's that pack mentality thing. I don't know what it is. I don't even pretend to understand it. But that's what had happened. Okay. So it's going into the early hours now. She's been there so long. And she actually asks them to walk her home. Right, so it's gone into the 9th of August 2010. All right. And CCTV footage is this CCTV footage, if ever you go away and look at it, is absolutely heartbreaking because you know what's just happened to this girl. And what you can see is Chantal, Daniel, Jessica, Joe and Duncan all walking through Rugby High Street with Gemma coming up the back. So they're not waiting for her. She's obviously in a lot of pain. She can't walk fast. She's having to stop as she's walking to get herself together. But it's them 5 that will stand out to you because you can't tell on first glance that there's even 2 girls in that group, Jessica and Chantal, because they've got hoodies on with the hoods up. Their faces are covered. They are covered head to toe, all 5 of them. It's August. Why are they covered up that much? Why are their faces covered? Now, I've heard it says, I think it was actually Emma Kenny in Britain's Darkest Taboos that had said that as an adult, if me or you had just been put through 4 hours of torture in someone's flat, house, wherever, and you got out into the open, into the street, you'd raise bloody murder. You'd scream, you'd run, you'd do what you could to try and get away. But she didn't. She didn't even try. Because even after everything they'd done to her the night before and then escalated into tonight, she still believed these were her friends. She still believed they liked her. That they wouldn't, I don't know what she was saying. I mean, they'd already hurt her so badly. So she knew they were capable of that. But she still followed them. And the footage of her walking behind them it's harrowing. That's why I've called that this. It is harrowing to watch. It's absolutely heartbreaking. The CCTV footage even zooms in at one point. You can see the blood on her nose and she's kind of dabbing it. She's got sort of a cap on. It said that they'd shaved her head at one point in the apartment as well. That seems to be a thing, doesn't it, in these cases? They love to shave people's head. Okay. So she believes, like I say, they're taking her home and they walk down to the railway track, the disused railway line. Okay, now this apparently would be a shortcut to Gemma's flat had they done a left as they got down to the railway track. But they didn't. They did a right. And she still didn't question it. And then as she was walking, they put a black bag over her head. She took it off, they put it back on again and began beating her. They beat her to the floor. They started kicking her, stamping on her. Just absolutely destroying this girl for nothing. Then I believe it was Chantal stabbed her in the shoulder blade. They just carried on beating her. There was a point where she was stripped naked, and Nikki says that she really hopes that they didn't make her strip naked in front. I just don't know. I don't know. Just the thought, what she would have been thinking at that point. But if you remember, she was naked when she was found. And then they just make sure that black bag's over her head and they put her into the grass verge and they leave her there to die. And then they walk back. And the CCTV footage of them walking back about 1 o'clock in the morning, exactly the same as it had showed them walking to the railway line, only walking back, Gemma's not with them. And they're holding hands and they're all waiting on each other. You can see they're all nattering, not like they've just murdered somebody, their friend. They all had phones on them. None of them even phoned an ambulance, even if you wanted to do it anonymously. Any one of them could have done it. They did nothing. And they went back to the flat. And it was said that the next day they went to Coventry, out drinking the next day, like nothing had happened, while Sue was hearing that her daughter had just been murdered, her youngest, her baby. And she was dealing with that. They were living it up in Coventry, having a whale of a time, while this woman's world has just fell apart. Now the autopsy, it showed that she had 50 injuries over her, 17 of them to her face and her neck. And she actually died drowning in her own blood from the broken nose. That's what she died of. She drowned in her own blood. And you want to know what really, really has broke my heart about this case? There was no defensive wounds. None. She didn't even try to protect herself. She didn't even try. She didn't have that in her. She didn't know what they were doing, but she didn't even, I've said it before, as an adult, you would run or you would fight, you would do something. That's how an adult would react in that situation. Or you would at least try and protect yourself. This girl didn't know what the hell was going on. She didn't know why they were doing it, but she didn't even try to defend herself. There was no defensive wounds. That really broke my heart, that did. It's just awful. Okay, now by Thursday the 11th of August 2010, so we're talking only 3 days later, 4 days later, sorry, all 5 are charged with murder. Okay, of course they all blame each other. None of them are really taking it seriously. He said that they didn't really see Gemma as one of them, as a human being. They didn't see her as one as human. They saw her as less than. They didn't really see what all the fuss was about. What's the problem? Okay, we killed her and what? They just didn't care. They couldn't care less. No, obviously Sue and her family are utterly devastated. They Nikki said she had an inkling that it could be Chantal, but she wasn't sure. But Sue didn't. She thought that Gemma had come across a stranger who'd lured her down there. So she was devastated when she heard it was her friends. And she was like, it was 5. It's bad enough to find out that your child's been murdered by one person, but to find out that they were murdered by 5 people. 5 people who she thought were her friends, and not one of them tried to stop what was going on. Let's not forget, it didn't all happen in the flat. They walked her to her death. So Chantal Booth, now she was 22 by the time of sentencing. She was sentenced to 21 years. Sorry, I've fast-tracked there. Chantal Booth, Daniel Newstead and Joe Boyer, okay, were all found guilty of murder. All right. Chantal got 21 years, Daniel got 20, and Joe got 16 years, okay? Duncan Edwards and Jessica Loyners, they were found guilty but of manslaughter. I believe they got manslaughter because when they went down to the railway track, they didn't get involved in the attack on Gemma. That's what's been said. Duncan sentenced 15 years, Jessica to 13 years. Okay, they were their sentences. This was obviously seen as a hate crime. Now, these sentences, you know, if you are listening in America, you know, and we're used to the American sentences, this must seem like, say it again, what, did you say 121 years? Or did you actually say 21 years? Must be a shock to you. But these were actually high sentences for the UK. So it was showing how disgusted everyone was at what these animals did. Oh, I've called them animals. God, I've got to stop using that term. Monsters did. Okay, cretins. The judge actually says she followed you like a loyal puppy, battered and bruised. Oh, and like I say, they were like, she was so different. So what was the problem? Who cares? That's what the 5 killers were thinking. Who cares? She was so different to us. Why do we care? Until the sentences got dropped down and the 2 girls start screaming and crying and hugging each other. 3 lads just go very quiet. But while the trial was going on, they had to separate them and everything because they were just idiots just prattling about. I don't think they thought they were going to do any time whatsoever. They genuinely didn't see Gemma as human. That's how bad these people are. Oh no. Sue actually turned round and she says that if Gemma had have lived, say she'd have gone through that ordeal and she had have lived, Sue said that Gemma would have actually forgiven them. That's the type of person she was. She would have forgiven them. Oh, and Sue, bless her, she goes out to schools now to teach kids that just because people are maybe different to you, that's not a bad thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, you know. That's what makes us us. Of course, we're all different. And she goes out and she teaches this in schools, which I think is amazing. Okay. There is footage of obviously Taylor and Nikki looking at pictures, which is awful, but Taylor then, obviously, which is Gemma's niece, begins to talk and says that she actually knew Jessica and Joe. Don't forget there's only, I think, 11 years between Gemma and her niece. Now, there was a good age difference. There was about 10 years between Joe and Gemma. So she went to school with Jessica and Joe. She wasn't friends with them. She didn't hang out with them. She just knew them to see. And she says of Jessica, she said she was the type of girl that you'd see in the playground. You'd see her getting in trouble and you knew to stay away from her. She goes, but just to realise that it's someone that I did know of that could do that to my aunt, it just scares you because you don't want to trust anyone. You can't trust anybody. And that's very, very sad. Now, they asked Nikki, what would you say to Gemma if you could say anything to her now? And Nikki just goes, I'd say I'm sorry. And she does break down. She says, I wish I'd have been there for her. Taylor says, I'd ask her, do you want to come to dinner? Just those little things is what Gemma loved. And it's very, very sad. Now, there was a serious case review. It's much like social services when we do stories that relate to children. A serious case review was ordered for the errors in Gemma's care, or lack of care, should I say. There was 23 missed opportunities to help Gemma in the decade before her death. 23 missed opportunities between the age of 17 and 27 when she was murdered. And they just missed it. They didn't miss it. They just didn't even try. She'd even written to them herself when she was 25 asking for help. Gemma had done that. And it was ignored. And the representative that I saw in this interview, you can hear him talking and he says, we're sorry, I'm sorry. And you think, yeah, I find myself leaning forward like, is he going to miss something here? But then he turns around and he says, but I don't think we could have prevented it though. So he's sorry that she's died, but he's not sorry for their mess up, them not helping. He's just sorry that it happened. I was sickened when I heard that. It was like, we couldn't have stopped it happening. Our intervention. Of course he would have, because she would have had a social worker. She would have had someone around her. She wouldn't have been out at that time of the morning. Just very, 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 very sad story. It really is. Just breaks my heart every time. Every time I see anything on this or think about it, it's just, it's such a sad case. And that was the Harrowing Gemma Hayter Story. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Oh, God, I don't even know what to say now. Like I say, I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. if you'd like to join me. If you'd like to subscribe, that'd be amazing. Or like the video or just comment. That'd be great. But thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you Thursday. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you.